Thank you very much. Very excited to be here. Feeling very honoured to be invited. So thank you. A little bit about me. So you've just heard quite a lot about me. The other thing is I'm the mum to four children. So my oldest is 18, my eldest, and they range in age then, mainly actually at the top end, but my youngest is 6. And so, as Trace said, we've been living in Albania for 6 years, and then God brought us back to the town that we'd left from. And I was doing some children and youth work in the town, and the schools were just really, really open and receptive to us going in. Non-faith schools, but doing kind of lunchtime Bible clubs and after-school Bible clubs and Christmas activities. Really keen to invite us in. But I was really feeling like God wanted to do something more beyond the walls of the church and beyond the walls of the school. And that's when Muddy Church started. I was a lecturer at that point for CYM, and one of my students was talking about an activity he'd done with a children's group and some parents, and they'd gone for this walk. And one of the parents said, "Oh, you should have called this Muddy Church." And he'd mentioned this to me, and I went, "Oh, what a great name!" And he was like, "Yeah." He wasn't really that bothered. And I said, "Are you going to use that? It would be fantastic. It's a really great name." And he was like, "No, I'm not." So, well, if you're not, I'm going to use it. And this is 5 years ago that I started Muddy Church in our little town here. Denise McGarvey works in our town as well. And one of the things that Muddy Church is based on, I teach modules on mission and community. And you know how God takes all those little bits of our lives and all our experiences and kind of mushes them together sometimes. You kind of go, oh, actually, that bit of my life makes sense to this bit of my life. And you might not have thought they were really connected. But as I've been teaching about community, I teach something called asset-based community development. And that's really the formation of Muddy Church. Asset-based community development is about finding the gift or finding the treasure in your community. So I could tell you all the terrible statistics and everything that was bad about our town. I could tell you about the generational decline. I was listening today about some of those statistics about young white people not going to university, and I could tell you about the statistics in our town where that happens, and you know, the Ofsted reports and everything else. But asset-based community development isn't just looking for all those negatives that we all hear and we all know. Instead, it's looking at what are the gifts, what are the treasures where you live. And for us, just at the end of our road, there's a little park, and it's got a small car park, and then it's got a pathway around and a little stream at the bottom. There's two train tracks going either side of it. There's the hum of the M1 because we're right by there in the background. So it's not just all picturesque. I like to tell people that I live in Sherwood Forest, which is almost true. It makes it sound much more beautiful than it is. The truth is, train tracks, hums of cars, and a small green park area. Um, but for me, that was the treasure in our community. And when we're thinking about the treasures, it's not just the places and spaces, but also the people. And my heart is really about intergenerational ministry. So my background is I'm a qualified youth worker. I've been doing children and youth work for many, many years. So you can see the grey, even though I try and hide it. But my heart really is intergenerational ministry, where we can come together as a body of Christ and all ages are respected and valued and share together. So Muddy Church is kind of a clash of all of those things. Finding the treasures in your community. That's the places, the spaces, and the people. We talk about wandering and wondering together because it's not going on a huge hike, but about wandering, going for a wander, seeing what God's got for you and for other people, and wondering. And in that wondering, it's not about Lucy saying, oh, this is what the Bible says. This is what, I'm going to teach you today all about Noah's Ark, and this is what it's all about. It's actually wondering together, what's God telling us through the story of Noah's Ark? And to respect that different people of all faiths and none can come together and share in that wandering time, and that everybody's voice is valued. So I learned so much from my just 6-year-old. Learned lots from her when she was 5, so I'm sure the same will happen when she was 6. Because she wondered and would notice things that I wouldn't see, or my head would be busy thinking about what we're going to do next, or how are we going to get, our boots clean, or are we going to get a coffee at the end of the wander? Whereas she would notice the yellow leaf and see the treasure in that. She would look, and we're talking about darkness and shadows, and we could think about, where is God in the dark? Where is God in the shadows? And so it's wandering together and understanding that everybody has a voice and something important to say. Um, so the important thing with Muddy Church, I'll say now, all of the resources are available absolutely free of charge on the website. I always, and I'm not just saying this because I'm at a Salvation Army thing, I always say the Get Out resources for toddlers from the Salvation Army are absolutely brilliant. I love them. If you're looking for something for a little bit older or for intergenerational, you're very welcome to use ours or adapt them to fit in. Like I say, they're all free. You can use the name Muddy Church and you could not use the name Muddy Church. I honestly don't care. I don't get paid for doing Muddy Church. It's kind of my mission offering to anybody who wants to use it, if you want to use it. I lots of people are kind of like, oh, I like the name Muddy Church, can we use it? Yes, you can. Or can I use the logo? Yes, you can. Some other people say, oh, can I use the logo, but can I adapt it? Yes, you can. Actually, we really love to use your resources, but we don't want to call it Muddy Church. We want to call it Welly Wangers. Call it Welly Wangers. It really doesn't matter. The Muddy Church stuff is there for you to use if you want to and if it's helpful to you. There are some other things that we've just created. So there is a resource pack, because some people were saying they were struggling to print off the material, and our heart is that Muddy Church is accessible. So the aim is that I don't charge you for anything, but equally when I do Muddy Church, I don't charge anything for the groups coming to it. Now you might be in a different setting where you go, actually, if we don't charge anything, people don't have a value to it. So you might want to charge something. I don't care. I'm not going to take any cuttings from it. But my heart really is that it's accessible. And I think particularly in this COVID time, but anyway, we never know people's situation. And you might look and go, oh, they've got a lovely car and everybody's got big houses and stuff, but we don't always know what's going off behind them. So all of our resources are designed to be accessible as well. So I take off lots of the words and I try them out with my little girl, but she's too good at reading now, and say, like, what do you think this one's about? And trying to use the symbols and things so that, if somebody's got limited reading ability, they can still see from the picture or from the idea what it's about. And as well, when we're choosing our spaces and places, think of where's accessible to you and where's accessible to the people that you're reaching out to. Because, for me, Muddy Church isn't particularly about getting muddy. It's about getting out and connecting with nature. And thinking, actually, for some people, they have amazing church grounds and they can run something within their church grounds. And that might be fantastic. For other people, it's like, oh, we haven't got any church grounds, or we've only got a car park. Your car park might work. But actually, there might be a park nearby. So we've got a few people who are running community gardens and having that space where people can come together and grow things, and using the food to bless other people. We've got groups who are using church yards and church gardens. I had a great email the other day from a lady who said, do you mind if I use these resources? We haven't really got any outdoor space, but we've got these railings outside our church, and it's on the pathway near to school, so there's lots of people pass by, and so I've just started putting up some of your resources on there, and people can stop and read them as they're going to school. That's Muddy Church. It's whatever works for you and whatever is your gift. So I happen to know where we live in a small town. I run Muddy Church from where I live, down at the bottom end of our town. Denise lives in a different area in our town. We live in like I say, a small town. But actually, the people who we are reaching out to and the people we are working with and the places we live are totally different. So I live on a new build housing estate. What works for my estate is sometimes putting things on lampposts that people can go round and look at the trails as they go round. And then we've got this park that we can use that's fantastic. Sometimes it's just social media stuff. Where Denise lives, actually, I know, although she's in a totally different area, right on the edge of where she lives as well is the most amazing wild kind of spaces with deer in the mornings and things. And going, you know what? If you drove through our town, you would never imagine that those gifts were there. And lockdowns opened our eyes up to lots of these things. But it is that whole idea of what's in your space, what's in your places that could be a treasure that God could use and help people connect to the outside, connect to creation, and think about God and what He's doing. For me, when we've run Muddy Church, it's been a total mix. Like I say, it's been intergenerational, but it's also been a total mix of ages, of faith as well. So I always say it's about a 60-40 split between people who are in church and people who really don't have a lot of connection to church. And we've found, like I say, the different ages. Sometimes it'll be people who are walking their dogs and go, oh, I'd be walking my dog there anyway. Oh, come along to Muddy Church. It'll be interesting to see. They might not normally come to church at all. They have no connection really to church, but they're interested in joining with something and seeing what it's all about. We have a number of families who come, single mums and single dads, happy to have something to do with their kids that's free, and to get out and get away from screens and things like that. We have quite a few older people who will come and really enjoy having different people to walk and talk with. And for me, this idea of kind of the intergenerational is just that body of God. You know, I think we see it beautifully in the Passover meal, where the whole family sits around that table and the children ask questions. Tell us again those stories, what happened? And the starting of the stories of what's happened before and sharing those stories. And so for me, it's not just telling children the stories or telling people the stories, but waiting for that invitation. And I always say Muddy Church isn't Lucie's idea, and I don't pretend at any point that it is. You know, it takes us right back to Genesis 3, where God was in the garden walking with Adam and Eve and calling out to them and wanting to be part of their day, to be part of their everyday moments in their sharing together. And I believe, you know, we see that again in the risen Jesus on the Emmaus Road, when Jesus meets up with the disciples as they're walking along, and he doesn't just go, hey guys, it's Jesus, I'm back, here I am. He says, what are you talking about? What's happening? And he waits for them to tell him. He doesn't just butt in with, well, actually, you know, this is why I died. This is what it was all about. Yes, I am resurrected. Look, I'm here. And explain all of those things. He listens and walks with them and opens up that space for conversation and sharing together. And for me, that's so important in our faith, to help people own their own faith by offering those spaces for questioning, for saying, what's this all about? How does this fit into my life? How does this connect with what I'm doing? And how, you know, I've just lost somebody in the last year through COVID. Where's God in that? I've lost my business. I've lost, you know, my children have lost their friendships. Where is God in that? And enjoying the spaces to wonder together, to explore together. We don't have to have all the answers because we haven't got all the answers. But we can wonder together, and in that accompanying, we can see God do amazing things. So one of the other, I think I'm a few minutes left, one of the other things I always talk about is Moses. And Moses in the burning bush. I'm sorry if you've been at any of my other talks, because these are my scriptures, because they just fit so beautifully and explain Muddy Church. But when Moses was at the burning bush, he'd just come away. You know, he was brought up in the king's palace. He had privilege. He'd had position. He'd had respect from people. And in that, he saw that injustice and couldn't bear to see that injustice and reacted in anger and murdered somebody and then ran away. And he ran to some distant family that I doubt he really knew at all, relying on the friendship and the support of strangers. And as he was out looking after those sheep, he saw the bush that was burning but was not consumed. And he went over to it and he said, he looked and he waited and he was like looking at the bush. And the bush, or we know God, called out to him, Moses, Moses, take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. And that really is part of my passion for Muddy Church, that noticing of nature. I don't have to tell people, oh, look at this tree, it's growing apples on it. People can see that for themselves. People can see the wonderful, amazing creations around us. We see the sunsets and the sunrises. We see plants growing. You know, I love I love potatoes. Yes, I do. But planting potatoes, I just think it's like some kind of just wonderful thing. One, because it's very easy and I don't need to look after them too much. But you put those potatoes into a big bag and you leave them. I think you have to water them sometimes if it's not very rainy. But then they grow and you go back in and they've multiplied. It's like all these potatoes in there. Like, I go, wow, that's amazing. Like, from my one potato, there's all these little potatoes and it's just so much fun. It's noticing of nature, and in that, trusting that God can speak through nature. God could have done anything. And we know that, you know, when Jesus was born, the sky was filled with angels and they'd got the guitars and the horns and the trumpets and everything else. It was all going off in the sky, celebrating the birth of the Saviour. There's so many other examples of just people coming, messengers coming with an important message to say, this is what I've got for you. But God chose to use a bush and to speak through a bush, and not just to speak, but to call Moses' name. He didn't just go, oh, you over there. He said, Moses, Moses, take off your shoes because you're standing on holy ground. He called him by name, and he told him about a purpose that he'd got, and he told him that he was a holy God, and actually where he was holy. And the same's true for us when we go out into nature, when we connect with nature, when we go for our wonders and our wonders, whether it's us by ourselves or in a group of people, whether it's in the middle of a city or in the most beautiful rural setting, we can trust that God can speak through nature, to call us by name, to call the people that we're ministering to by name, and to tell them that they matter to him and that he's got something for them. The Bible tells us wherever you set your foot, you know, God's going to give us that land. And to claim the spaces and the places and to trust God to do it. So it's not about big plans and session plans, and I've done all of that. And I know if you're all children's ministers, you've all done session plans up to your eyelids and backwards, forwards, and probably in your sleep. We all know how to do session plans. It's a joy. But actually, there's a whole new step when you don't plan the session and you trust God to work in the session. And that's what Muddy Church is about, wandering together. Not just, oh, Lucie's in charge and she's the leader. But no, we're wandering together, we're a community. We've all got equal value and we can all do things and see things and hear God. So let's wander and see what God's got for us. I'll pause there.
You found that was enough time. So I don't know, does anyone want to share some of the conversation they had? I mean, one of those questions about a personal experience, if you want to share, it'd be great to hear. Just the conversations that you're having in the groups. Feel free to unmute and then just share if you. Any questions?
I don't. Sorry. We were more wondering about the logistics of Muddy Church. We loved the idea, thought it was incredible, really liked it, but just wondered more about do you need to contact the council, or if you're like if you're hanging stuff up on trees or putting resources around, do you have to ask anyone before you go? Or if you're going to a country park, do you have to contact the country park before you go to set it up? And is it best to have resources hanging from trees if you're doing it with children, or is a wander enough to kind of engage the children on the walk? That was kind of our question.
Want me to answer that, Tracy?
Oh yes, the questions are for you, love.
So, oh, that's quite a lot of questions in one space there. No, it's fine. So yeah, the practicalities are, I always ask our local council before we use the park, because it's public land. And somebody went, yeah, but it's only a group of people going for a walk, so you don't really need to, do you? And perhaps you don't really need to, but I think it's probably good practice to kind of contact your council and to say, particularly with the COVID regulations, to kind of say, we're planning on doing this. I send them a risk assessment, and it's a risk benefit assessment, because that's what I believe that we should be doing. I've got a copy of ours. I think it's on the website, but again, I'm happy to email that to anybody if you want to have a look and wiggle that around for your own setting. But and that's got the COVID kind of regulations for a trail as well. But what I found when I contacted our council, and it is literally sending an email and saying, I'm doing this. They said, can you fill in this form, which is like 3 questions, sent it back with the risk assessment, and they were absolutely brilliant. They loved it and have said, if you've, we love that you're doing this. Thanks ever so much. It's great. If you can tell us any more you're doing, or anytime you're doing it, we'll advertise it on our website. Just let us know, because it fits into a lot of the agendas. So in terms of, Johnny was just talking about in his area, they're doing the wellbeing walks, and I think our local council's doing those as well. But it fits into kind of the physical wellbeing, encouraging people to get out and get active. I obviously need to do it a lot more. For the mental well-being and that space and the place to talk together and chat together. But I believe as well, obviously, the spiritual well-being. So it fits a lot of kind of the agendas that are very current at the moment. And so I've not known any councils say, no, you can't do that. Somebody did say on a Zoom I was on the other day, that their council had said that they were going to charge for use of the park. So it's worth just checking that. Nobody else had really heard of that very much. But a couple of people said, oh yeah, our council's doing that. I'm not sure why. I don't know what the setting was or anything else. But that's another reason as well why it's worth asking. I mean, I know lots of kind of football groups, and we've got like a yoga group and a dog trainers that use our park, and I'm sure they don't ask permission. But I think it's good practice, and it builds up that connection with the community as well, and lets the council know, we're a church, and we're a faith group that wants to make a difference and wants to care about our community. You need to check your insurance as well, and particularly if you're not doing something within church or site. If you're going off site, does your insurance cover that? Again, it's often just letting them know that you're going to do something, but it's quite important. I always put on any advertising or any flyers, children and dogs remain the responsibility of the adult who brought them. So if you're doing a children's group, you need to adjust that, obviously. If you're doing a group for all ages in the park or around your estate or wherever, it's worth putting that on. One, because it means that everybody knows that we're all doing this together, but also it just kind of helps with the insurance and the liability, that actually children remain the dogs, because we always had dogs. You don't have to have dogs, you don't have to have cats, you don't have to have goats. If you want to have those, you can do. It's your gift, not mine. But yeah, so just putting that on, and also that please dress appropriately for the weather, and not being more specific than that works really well in Britain, because we never know what the weather's going to be like. However, if you're thinking about starting Muddy Church, I can virtually assure you that whichever week you choose, let me know, because it's bound to rain on that week and I don't want to be on holiday. It just seems to be, you take that step of faith, you're going to do this and it's fantastic, and it's going to rain. And it's kind of like, oh God, is this right? Is this wrong? But we found Muddy Church works whatever the weather. Honestly, sometimes the only time I haven't done it was when it was quite windy, and that's because the area we were going to's got quite a few trees, so the risks of branches falling or something was considered too great. But we've done it in snow, which was fantastic. I absolutely love doing it on snow, and some people brought sledges, and you can have the snowball fights, and a hot chocolate at the end. That's quite an important part of it. Rain and sunshine, and we have often found when it was really sunny, we had less numbers because people either didn't want to go out the house or were going somewhere else, to a park or to a paddling pool or something. So you just can't tell with the weather. The other question was about, just remember what the other part of the question was. It was about
about resources, whether you found hanging things on, like how resource heavy is it? Because obviously you're trying to engage children. Is it best to sort of hang things off trees, or have resources like they have to find a certain amount of leaves to match a colour swatch or something like that? Or actually, have you found that it is engaging enough for them just to go for a wander?
So we've got a total range. So if you go on the website and look at the different resources, there's a total range. So this isn't a plug for my book at all, but I have got a book, and it's just basically a wondering question. So this one says, there's a quote on it that says, "It's a great thing for man to walk on the moon, but it's a greater thing for God to walk on the earth," which was a quote by Neil Armstrong, who was the first man on the moon. And then opposite that is just these footprints that say, "I wonder if you can see God's footprints." So you might literally just share that with your group and go, we're going to go and see what footprints we can see, and can we see God's footprints? And for some groups, that's absolutely, they'll get it and they'll love it, and that's enough. For other people, they need more than that or something else. So we also do the trails, and we found over lockdown the reason for doing trails was because lots of people couldn't, none of us could gather, and so we found that by putting a trail up, people could still do Muddy Church but in their own space and time. And so this is just, sorry, again, this isn't an advert because you can get all of this on the website, but it's an example of one of the pages. This is Psalm 23. The Church of Ireland asked me to create something for the Muddy Picnic based on Psalm 23. I got a bit carried away and created a whole resource pack. So it just asks questions like, what things are green? Can you see water anywhere? I wonder if God is ever still. Then the next one is about he guides me along right paths, and that idea of I wonder if we can see God's footprints. The next one is about being invited to the table, and where can you see over things overflowing? I wonder if you can see, if you feel invited into this space. And that idea in Psalm 139, that he prepares a table for me. And then the last one is, surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And the idea of, I wonder what God's house looks like. So with this resource, if you wanted to buy the resource pack, I've only got half of them left. But it's printed on pages so that it's single-sided, so that you can literally take the page out of the book and put it up. So quite a few people use clip frames and hang those up. You can laminate things, but obviously laminating is really bad for the environment, and we do try and encourage people to be thoughtful about the environment. So it might be amongst you that actually there's a few of you want to do a Muddy Church trail, or you want to use some of the resources. You're going to laminate them and share them amongst yourselves rather than just using them once. The clip frames are great, and yeah, having them at a height that's appropriate so that children can see it, but adults can see it as well. So working out what heights are appropriate. It's not just parks. So we've run quite a few of the trails and things and had them in shop windows. So also in this pack, if I can find it, there's a sheep hunt. and there's 9 different sheep, and they've all got a number and a word on them. So this one's comfort, rest, loved, adventure, feast, chosen, pure, celebrate, and welcomed. And so you could just put these up around a space. It might be in shop windows, and do a trail around your town, inviting people to look on the sheep hunt and what can you find. And maybe filling in a little form as a competition or something. It might be, like I say, on lampposts or around a park area, finding the sheep, and then maybe having a picnic, and families or groups bringing their own little picnic mats and meeting together and eating together and chatting together. There are 9 sheep. So the whole idea of that was, is one missing? And so you could link it into the story of the Good Shepherd. And would you, do you think it's worth looking for another sheep? Would you still look for another sheep? What do you think the other sheep might have on it? Might you be, very much, we were just talking about godly play, and very much that kind of idea, what might be missing and what might be here, and might you be the other sheep? But just the different range of resources for your group. So again, it's looking at what treasures there are. Sorry, look, the other one in here is a colour trail. So there's green, blue, dark, yellow, and multicoloured. And the idea of that trail was to really thinking about kind of children's groups or youth groups, so that you could do one a week and do a series looking at different colours. And so you would just have that one sheet and look at that and think about, and it's got kind of 5 things, like you were talking about 5 leaves to find, or find 5 green things. Or your group, you might be able to split them off into different teams. So one's a green team, one's a blue team, one's a yellow team, one's a red team, one's a multicoloured team. Go off for an hour, in this little area, and then we're going to come back. Did you find your 5 things? What things, what does green smell like? What does yellow smell like? What does yellow feel like? All those kind of questions. Or even, one of the other ideas, because there's 5, you could use it as a holiday club. If you're thinking of over the 5 days and doing a different activity, again, taking it outside, doing green for day 1, and if you've got some helpers, or just to encourage people, come in your green clothes, or what can you wear that's green, or what can you bring that's green, and you might have some green wellies, or you might just have a green ribbon for your hair or whatever, and inviting people to kind of go out and do those things, and look at that for your activity. Maybe there's some craft ideas and stuff as well that links to the whole sheep, but just kind of quite low key, but using what we've got. So all the resources are free, but actually the idea of Muddy Church is that it's free. So no offence to Baker Ross, I feel like I'll probably get punished by them at some stage, but you don't have to put in a huge order from Baker Ross and get all your craft materials and buy a bag of pine cones and sticks and get some sticky eyes or anything like that. Actually, you can just go for a wander and find a stick. Look at the stick, and what does it look like? What do you might want to do a journey stick and get people to have some different ribbons or cotton or wool or whatever people have got spare bits of fabric. Tie those on. What are you connecting on your journey? You might do it as you're walking along on your journey, and somebody might find a lovely leaf, and somebody else might find a bit of moss on it, and adding those things, but looking at what's our journey like and how's it different, and thinking about our journey with God through our lives. You might want to look at how all the sticks are different and link it to Psalm 139. So it really is aimed to be free for people. And the other thing that I always say, which is very popular at the moment, is it doesn't take a load of people resources. So we do talk to you about, think about the gifts in your community, but for some of us right now it's really hard because we haven't got a load of volunteers for whatever reason. People who are still shielding or not sure about coming back, people who haven't been doing stuff for 2 years and have kind of gone, actually I like not doing stuff, or I like not doing the children's age anymore, I'd like to do something else. When I've done Muddy Church, I've done it. It's been me. I've got a friend who I used to work with at Montessori school, and she would come and bring her kids, and I knew she'd got the same ethos. She does godly play as well, so I knew we'd got the same ethos, and we could just wander, and it doesn't because it's not somebody leading it and you've got to have everything planned out. You've not got to have Jim doing the washing up and Maureen welcoming everybody and Barbara cooking the hot dogs and Frank clearing up the glitter afterwards. Nobody wants to clear up the glitter. Bless Frank for doing that. But you don't need to have all of that. You just go together as a community and wander together. And so it is very, very accessible, very easy, and I think that's probably why I love it, because I'm just lazy, really. So I don't want to do session plans, and I don't want to sort out a rota, and I definitely don't want to be cooking for everybody. Denise has been to my house, I think, once before for food. She will tell you that's not a blessing. But just that idea of actually, our ministry doesn't have to drain us, and I'm sure most of you have given so much over these last 18 months, and all the different circumstances you've all been in, and trying to keep things going or trying to create resource packs to send out. Denise does amazing videos every week and activities, and I know so many people have been working and giving and serving and really wanting to bless their community, and are tired. We're tired, we're weary, and Muddy Church is that chance for us to be restored as well, where we are part of that wandering and learning together. So, sorry, Georgina, I went off on a long time there. Sorry, Tracy.
No, you're fine.
I'll probably get in trouble.
Yeah. Lucy, I've just got a question. When we were talking about kind of planning for this evening, you gave some really helpful kind of insights into kind of the age range of the kind of youngsters that connect more with nature. I just don't know whether you can just kind of give a brief summary, because that was really interesting.
Yes. Let me see. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, we need to make you.
No, okay, it doesn't matter. It's fine, because it's only one graph thing. Okay. What it is, so I do work for the University of Derby, and just by total coincidence, there's a professor. I was going to say a guy at our university. He's a professor, so I probably shouldn't, and I've never met him. But his name is Miles Richardson, and he's done some research. It's part of the Wildlife Trust. And looking at nature connection, and actually if you do a search for nature connection, there's a free course, I think it's still free, that you can sign up to that looks at nature connection. But part of the research that he and some other people were doing was looking at what does nature connection mean and what difference does it make. Everybody's now like, oh, away from her, no, forget the football, I'm signing up for that course. But they found, so nature connection is not just going out into nature, but when we connect with nature. So that idea of Moses noticing the bush, about going out and picking up a stick rather than just going for a walk, actually the intentionality of what are we going to do to notice nature. So that's why all of our resources have something that hopefully help us think. So thinking, where might we see God's footprints, makes us look for God's footprints or think about God's footprints and where they might be. And so nature connection is where it affects our well-being, and that's, again, like I say, our mental, our physical, and for me, our spiritual well-being. And that connection helps us in terms of coping and living and all that sense of well-being, being well and happiness. And in the research, they looked across all ages, and they noticed that children have got a really high nature connection, which you'll get. So my daughter comes home, picked her coat up, and I was like, what's in your coat? It's so heavy. And her pockets are full of stones that she's collected from school. I swear there are no more stones in that school. They're all in her pockets. She just loves stones and picking them up, and then I'm like, really, we need to take the stones back to school? And she's like, no, but mummy, this one's my favourite. And we'll tell you all about these stones. And children do that. They notice, like I say, the yellow leaf and, the treasures that children will find when you go outside through noticing. So they've got a high nature connection. They've got a high sense of well-being when they're outside because they're connecting with nature. And the research found then there was a dip, and it started to rise again in about the late 30s, 40s, and evened off again to a high level of that well-being, which I think is often true. That, you know, I think particularly when you talk to older people, they appreciate their gardens. I'm rubbish at gardening, but I love to see other people's gardens where they're beautiful. And you will often find, you know, an older generation will appreciate nature again. And again, it's that well-being. But there's this huge dip. We're starting about 10 or 11 and going through 20s and up to the beginning of 30s. But particularly, what's key is around teenagers. Because their sense of nature connection and therefore nature well-being is low. It's virtually non-existent. And so lots of people go, yeah, well, young people don't want to be outside, do they? They always want to be on their phones or playing Xbox. Or, and I go, no, that's not actually true. If you say to a young person, let's go for a walk, they might be a little bit, oh no, not sure about that. But actually, there's so many great projects that are working with one-to-one with young people or one-to-two with young people, just going for a walk. And, you know, Emmaus Road, sharing that conversation, sharing the stories. And it's often a whole lot less threatening for people to be walking along side by side and sharing about life than if you're sat in a meeting or in a group and, so what's going off with life? How's exams going? You know, they're more likely to tell you if you're just outside. It just happens. And for me, like I say, my background is youth work, so I know that kind of teenage years, Erickson talks about it being about identity and young people finding identity versus inferiority, working out who they are and where they fit in this world. If we can help connect them to nature, we can help them to understand their place in the world. We can help them to understand that they belong, that they're a part of this and they matter. You might go, oh no, they'll just think the world's such a huge place. But actually, again, geeky Lucy, research has shown that after natural disasters or natural phenomena like eclipses or tsunamis or earthquakes, people have a higher nature connection, have a higher connection to the world and a better sense of belonging after natural events, natural phenomenon. So actually, if we're taking young people, they see this is my community. I do fit here. And they begin to notice, like we're noticing, the gifts in the community rather than just going, oh, I can't wait to get out of here. They see the beautiful things. And it's honestly, it's not just about phones, but if that has to be your way in with young people, then use that. You know, give them the challenge. Can you best photo of the week or take a photo of the smallest thing you can see? You know, and getting them to look for ants and bugs and things like that. Because I don't know whether it's just all the young people I've ever worked with, but a bit of competition always works really well. You know, and if that's the way that we can connect young people to nature by using their phones, let's do it. You know, but equally walking together. I know one group that does one muddy church that does a fish and chip walk, and they've gone around their town and done a survey of the fish and chips shops in their town, and they go each week and the leader buys some chips and they take them and they rank them on what level it is. But actually getting outside, meeting together, eating together, spending that time in relationship. So I am really passionate, particularly about young people having that nature connection, because it is about that whole well-being and sense of who I am, where I belong, and most importantly, you know, trusting that Moses encounter, hearing God as they connect with nature. Just some practical tips. So I talk a lot about finding the gifts in your community. You might be going, right, well, I'm not really sure. For some people, when you've lived somewhere for a long time or you've been working somewhere for a long time, you can miss some of the new gifts that, or even some of the gifts that have already always been hiding there. Sometimes it needs a fresh pair of eyes. Sometimes when we move into a new area, we don't know. I remember moving when we came back from Albania, we moved house kind of 3 times within 2 years, and just remember not knowing anything about this one house that we lived in. and taking my children on a really exciting tour around our streets to go across to this shop because we didn't know where else there was in the community. And so sometimes it's good to get that kind of fresh look at what is our community and actually what fits in brilliantly. I love that photography course. I am going to download that and do that with my daughter. But one of the great ways to do a community profile, and which you could do with other people, is going for a walk in your community. And if you've got a smartphone or if you've got a real normal camera, photography machine, otherwise known as a camera, if you've got one of those things, you know, those technology, you can just, if it's a smartphone, you can set it on like an automatic taking photos every, you can see I'm a technology whiz, every 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Otherwise, you can just stop every 2 minutes or every 3 minutes and take a photo. Don't kind of go like, oh, look at that pretty gateway. It's got an arch around it. And, oh, that's a lovely picture. I'll take that. And, oh, look, some blossom. I'll take a picture of that. Don't do any of that. Just literally take whatever you see in front of you and go for a walk, half an hour, however you want, long you've got, and just take photos every 2 or 3 minutes. Bring them back and look at them. And ask God to show you, where are the gifts here? Even better than that, if you're working with a group of people, get them to go out and do that. Bring the photos. Make sure you're not fitted in with what Sergio's just said, but make sure you haven't got people on the pictures. But get people to go out and take maybe a picture of their favourite place, or a picture of a place they don't like, or a picture of a place that is hope to them. And just go out and take those photos from your community, bring them back, share them together, and look at what is God saying and where might God be calling us to. Another way you can do a community profile is just get a map, go on Google Maps, and looking at what are the defining parts in our community. You know, like us, have you got a train track that kind of separates the area? Is there a motorway or a road running through it? Oh, it was terrible in my breakout room, honestly. Everybody was in like amazing places. Oh, I'm by the beach. Oh, I'm by the beach. I'm by the beach and the canal. I'm by the mountains. Oh my goodness. We've got such amazing places around us. You might be going, I'm not in any of those places. It's fine, neither am I. But what are the defining places? What are the gifts? What are the treasures where we live? You know, my new build estate, I never wanted to live on a new build estate. Every house looks pretty much the same. And God put us here and I went, what are you doing? When I was looking at houses, I blocked off this estate because I didn't want to live here. And, oh, surprise, surprise, that's exactly where God said and showed us the house. And I was like, that's our house. And it is our house now. But that sense of, actually, there's so much possibility on this estate. We don't have a central park, we don't have a nice area, we don't have a community area, but we've got lampposts, we've got a route round, it's a closed off estate, so you can walk around in an area. And I am not a big fan of Halloween at all, but obviously not last year, the year before we did the angel light thing instead of Halloween, and dressed up as angels and took sweets and gave sweets rather than receiving them, and just seeing the community of people and chatting to people and the amazing atmosphere and going, actually where I live is a real treasure. It's a real gift to live here. And you know, we're looking at Facebook and social media, how can you build that community? So thinking about ways to do a community profile practically on what are the defining areas, taking some photos. You can look at all the statistics and things and it will tell you what kind of issues are in your community, but try and look instead at what are the treasures. What was I going to say? See, it's getting late now, 8:30. What was I going to say? I can't remember what else I was going to say on that, but yeah, so any of the resources, like I say, looks like Salvation Army. So I knew about the Get Out. I didn't know about the side by side, which is very much what I've been talking about, walking alongside people. I work with Linking Lives as well, who look at befriending people who are feeling isolated, or particularly older people, going into care homes. You know, you can use the Muddy Church resources, and I'm sure you can use the side-by-side resources, and encouraging, you know, young people to have those relationships with other people who are in a different generation to them, and obviously respecting, being careful of safeguarding, but setting up those spaces where we can engage with nature in our communities. Like I say, if there's any way that I can help you, please, please, I'm really happy to chat to anybody. I do chat a lot. Please, I'll tell you, yeah, don't start on it. But yeah, just really to encourage you, you know, I do know that it's been tough, but I also know that this is a great opportunity. I loved seeing on that poll that actually, whilst it might be a nightmare, the whole restructuring and looking at those values again, what an incredible, once in a lifetime opportunity to look at what we're doing, to look at what gifts we've got, to look at our community, to look at our families, our children, our young people, and to be able to say, actually, what do we need to leave behind? What is the old wine, and what do we need to pick up and put into fresh wineskins? Probably shouldn't talk about that analogy in the Salvation Army, should I? But that whole idea, you know, of what's the new opportunities. Don't just rush back and go, oh yeah, we can open up, and going back to the old ways. God's given us this opportunity to look again, to change that decline, to change those statistics of children and young people leaving the church, and to build again our communities of faith, our communities of families. Never has there been such a time with people needing support, needing hope, needing life. And we've got access to the greatest provider of all of those. So use this time. Like I say, I don't care whether you use Muddy Church or don't use Muddy Church. But do please use this time and know that you are making a difference, and you have made a difference. I often talk about, I do have a lovely little reading about thistles and dandelions, and it talks about how God treasures the thistles and the dandelions as much as he treasures the lilies. And just remember that, you know, God looks at each of you. You might not be the most beautiful, outstanding, all together, best resources, living by the sea with the mountains in the background. You might not have all of that, but God has planted you exactly where you are. And I think especially of those dandelions, you know, when they turn into the thistledown, when they turn into we call them fairies, and they blow them on the dandelion clock, and those seeds spread out. And just believing for you all that actually what you're doing, that this might be a time of the seeds going out and spreading out. You don't have to know where they land. You just have to be faithful in being you, blossoming as you are, who you are and where you are, and trusting God with the rest.